I'm Kirstie. I'm a BBC journalist and I have a 2-year-old son. I was really pleased to be asked to host this panel because having a fulfilling career and still enjoying a family is something I'm really passionate about, and I'm always trying to learn from others how to do better at that as well. So I think this pandemic's been tough for everyone, and obviously parents have faced different challenges. And I wanted to caveat by saying, of course, we've all got different setups and experiences, but hopefully there'll be some stuff in this hour which resonates and we can all come away feeling a bit of solidarity. So let's jump in, and I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us how was the first lockdown, if they can remember that far back, and what did you find the most challenging? Janae, are you happy to start us off?
Yeah, that's fine. So my name is Janae. I'm a freelance journalist, mostly working with the BBC, and outside of that, I'm a research manager for the National Institute for Health Research. So it's like the research arm of the Department of Health and Social Care. The first lockdown, so I have a 7-year-old son. His name's Jaden. He's the only one I have. And maybe after lockdown is the only one I'm going to have, because having to homeschool and work in the first lockdown was really challenging. I think one of the biggest things for me was that as a parent, I'm strict but quite really reasonably fair. I'm quite fair on him, and he does respect me as his mum. But when I had to take on the role of teacher as well, he did not respect me as a teacher at all. So that was where a lot of our battles came in, and I found that really hard. I think it was in the first instance, it was trying to like strike a balance and also work with my employers so that they would understand that this had to kind of be my priority. And my son also has learning difficulties, so he's got dyspraxia, he's dyslexic, and he's got an auditory processing syndrome as well. And in the first lockdown, it just meant that all of his services stopped. So there was no occupational therapy, there was no speech and language therapy, there was no support from educational psychologists. So it was really trying to take on all of those roles as well, teacher, occupational therapist, speech therapist, ed psych, which was really difficult, and have the balance. We made it because we're here today, but I would say I had to, towards the end, I think I just got really relaxed, and I just kind of, this was off the idea that I can only do as much as I can. And I didn't want anything to really damage our relationship. I didn't want us to continue be going at loggerheads. And I didn't know some of the techniques that the professionals, especially because he has learning difficulties, there's certain ways that people work with Jaden and introduce new topics that were very difficult. So I would say, yeah, the first lockdown was very challenging for us, but a positive is that we got to spend a lot more time together. Because I'm a single mom, I split my time with Jaden, so he normally goes away on the weekends. So it was nice to be able to spend a lot more time with him. Apart from when we was arguing about schoolwork, we had a lot more movie nights, we had date nights, and we had a lot of fun together. So I would say we're a lot closer now because of it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and homeschooling, something I didn't have to deal with, and I'm sure we'll come back to that later on. And I also just wanted to say, before I bring in John and Susana, if anyone wants to say anything on the chat, we would like this to be interactive, and there'll be time at the end for questions as well. But do post any questions or say anything on the chat if you want to say anything. John, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for the introduction there, Kirstie. I'm John. I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm the dad of 2 boys. They're now aged 10 and 7. They're in different schools. So when the first lockdown happened, we had to kind of, myself and my wife, we both work full time, had to kind of manage that and manage 2 different schools, 2 different systems, 2 rambunctious boys who were bouncing against the walls and would refuse to sit down at their chairs, particularly had much structured learning. And we found that incredibly difficult in the first few months. As well as that, or on top of that, I think lockdown made me look at what I did as a dad and the so-called kind of conventional roles that dads play or do not play in parenting. That's something maybe I can get into later. At the same time, as doing work, I decided to do a survey into the mental well-being, a global survey into the mental well-being of journalists. And last week I published a report into that, which is journalism in the time of COVID. And, you know, as you said right at the top, Kirstie, you know, everyone has got their own perspective, their own issues, but parenting was one of the issues that I dealt with, mainly because as a parent, I'm going through it myself. But I did speak to other mums and dads about how difficult it was to look after kids through that kind of prism of work.
Yeah, we'll definitely go pick up back on your report as well. And Susana?
Hi everyone, so I'm Susana Francis. I'm a journalist for the BBC, focusing mainly on politics. So I've been was based at BBC Westminster. I think the hardest thing for me, I think it's been a total realignment of self. And I think in that sense, I mean, a lot of my, I would say self-value or value of myself or self-esteem, I guess, I think came from my work and productivity, because I love what I do. I love being creative. And I think a lot of my currency for myself is based on my productivity, my ideas, what I was doing, how busy I was. And I have a 5-year-old son, Levi, and this time I think has been, similar to Sinead's, been the most I've actually spent with my son. So when he was 2 years old, I went back to do my master's. So pretty much from the age of 2, I think for my career-wise, I've been very focused on that while juggling being a parent, but it meant a lot of my focus was on work and creativity and what I was doing and my achievements in that way. So when he wasn't at school anymore, and that kind of, I guess, the defined lines of my structure of my day of like dropping off to school, our breakfast club, and then going to work and being work Susana, and then coming back and being mum Susana, that was totally shattered. And so I think really the merging between mum me and work me, I think has been the most contentious and the most difficult, but also I think the most rewarding aspect of it all.
Thanks, Susana. I can definitely know how you feel about being so your identity being so bound up in being a journalist and being creative, and how that maybe put some tension on that during the lockdown. I think it was it still is such an exciting time to be a journalist, and it feels like we're sort of providing a genuine public service at the moment. And I think that made me want to sort of come flying out of the traps and you know, just say yes to everything and take up every opportunity. And I definitely at the beginning spread myself too thin, and I did in the end up feeling like I was sort of not doing very well at journalism or at parenting. I just you just couldn't, I just had something had to give really. So I think I've learnt a lot since then, which we'll probably pick back up on. But I mean, obviously it's been tough for us, and the mental health is obviously something that will be at the forefront of our minds as well. And John, you mentioned there that you did a report into journalism and mental health and how people were coping. So it would be good if you could talk us through sort of your key findings, and perhaps with parents in mind.
Well, just thank you. So just listening to what Azana said about that kind of blurring of lines, I think certainly for parents, there was that notion that maybe illusory sense of notion that you had kind of flexible working, and that kind of gave you more freedom. Certainly in my report, I think a lot of people, and a lot of those happened to be parents of kids, said we want more flexible working because, you know, we need to manage our home lives as well. And while I think that is generally good, I think, you know, there are some problems that can emerge from that. And certainly from my perspective, I've done this countless times this year, where, as I said, my kids are 10 and 7, so we get them to bed roughly about now, that their mother is dealing with them tonight. But you'd have that feeling where, and I'm a freelancer, so I wasn't working conventional 9 to 5 hours, where it'd be 9 o'clock, yay, right, okay, I can go and do some work now, and work from 9 to 11, where really I should have been getting off the grid. And I think that sense of working all these kind of weird hours and working on weekends, and so I'm lucky enough to have a partner where I can kind of divvy up time like that. But it felt like I was in a kind of a washing machine, feeling all kind of tossed around and a little bit discombobulated. The problem was at the start of lockdown, when we were speaking to people, was that, let's face it, our news industry wasn't in a good space already. When you think there's a perfect storm going on where the business model is certainly in crisis. Freelance journalism is one of the few growth industries in it. There's a lot of people with staff roles who are being made redundant and being asked to do more. And you sort of have a culture in a newsroom which is perhaps, shall we say, not empathetic to kind of people's own kind of home situations. There's that kind of driven kind of toughness in journalism. It's in our DNA, where you define yourself, or you can be perceived to define yourself by your ability to kind of soak up pressure. And the type of people who tend to get promoted and become newsroom leaders are those people who do that best, and maybe who have put up with it. So when you turn around to them and say, well, I've got parenting issues, or it might be other issues at home as well. You don't always have a friend in your corner, and just looking at how journalism in the 21st century, when you think it was slow to adapt to digital, it was slow to adapt its business model. Culturally, journalism needs to undergo a transformation as well, in the way that we treat our staff. First of all, it's just being humane and just thinking about that kind of work-life pressure that we're all under. But when journalism preaches to people about how to live their lives, we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. And then one of the other aspects that takeaways from my report is that I think for newsroom to understand what pressures parents and all manner of people are under, all manner of journalists are under, is that no qualitative studies or work has been done into the days that have been lost because of mental health, because of mental strain, because of mistakes, or the amount of money that has been invested, or time that's been invested trying to make newsrooms more young and diverse. If you have young parents who feel trapped in a pandemic bubble and are writing about news all the time, they don't have an enlightened boss, they're going to leave the industry. So I think a lot more work effort needs to be done into the mental strain that is being put on journalists. And parenting is one of those examples where that blurring of lines that Susana was talking about, well, literally work and home life has been blurred. And I think what managers and bosses need to do, whether you're a parent, whether you're living 24/7 with a bunch of annoying flatmates, or even if you're just on your own, is have that kind of understanding of people's situations. Whether you're a parent or whomever, whatever your situation is, this pandemic has forced us to think about people's home situations, because we're literally going into, people's rooms.
I mean, were there any bosses, and this is to all three of you, were there any sort of bosses or colleagues or individuals who really made a difference in helping you cope with these tough times? I mean, that some people in the audience might even not be parents and might just be looking at how to support working parents. So it'd be good to hear from any of you.
I think for me, I wouldn't say it was necessarily one person. I think it was a mixture of things. I think the first point I would say is, I guess, going to a lot of the Zoom meetings and actually seeing quite senior members of staff equally struggle getting the balance right. I think that really helps. I think just I would say the one thing about COVID, I think it's been really grounding. Like, it's kind of put a lot of people on a level playing field, in the sense that we're all at home, we're all now in a way exposing the parts of ourselves that maybe when we're in the office you don't often see, or you're not privy to. I think that helps. And I also found, for me, actually speaking to my friends that don't have kids and just actually seeing how that they found it hard as well, I think it kind of, not in a horrible way, but it did make me feel better, in the sense of like, okay, my friend hasn't got any kids responsibility, so I'm all right, kind of feeling a bit flat. And because I think one of the points that John said really resonated with me was because before I initially coming into the BBC, I kind of was always quite insecure about the fact that I was young and I was a parent and I was young and I'm Black and I'm a woman, and I kind of often would sort of put the journalist part of myself in the forefront, because I thought, well, she's kind of a bit more tough, and people probably like her more. Whereas if I went into interview and was like, hi, yeah, I'm Susana, and I'm a single parent and my son's 4, would I get the job? Would people feel like I was capable? There's all of those sorts of insecurities I think play on people, and plagued me definitely. And so I think the real leveling of the playing field COVID wise, I think has been really great for me, and I kind of think for our industry as a whole, and hopefully for a lot of other young parents.
Yeah, how about you, Janae?
Yeah, I would say the same. I think when you talk about leveling the playing field, I think that when Susana said that really resonated with me, because even especially with the journalist side of stuff, there's always stuff that happen in the evenings, panels like this, opportunities like this today. And before COVID, I wouldn't have been able to take part in something like this. It would have meant, going to pick up Jaden, finding childcare, and even going back into London. So it was good to be a part of some of those, to have new opportunities and new ways of working. In terms of management, I would say I've been quite lucky. My managers have sort of been, I think because they're so scared of getting it wrong, he's just like, whatever you need, we're going to kind of give to you. And I think I see the only difference was the expectation of, okay, how are you going to break up your working day? And I had to kind of explain to him is that a lot of my colleagues have husbands, or they're from a 2-parent household where there is that support. So just because it's just me and Jaden here, so you're going to have to be more flexible in that. There is no one that can pick up the slack. So if I can't make a Zoom because he's got a Zoom as well that I need to sit on him with, well, then you just need to understand that. I think in the beginning, because it was like I had that pandemic guilt, because it was like, especially because a lot of things that I write about are to do with health. So it was like everyone was struggling. It's a virus, nobody really knows what to do. But then after a while, I just kind of had to get really firm and be like, no, this is what I'm willing to do. Like, you're going to have to work with me. Whereas in the beginning, I think I was just trying to pour out too much. You never really wanted to be like, oh yeah, I can't do it because I've got to homeschool and I have no support because we're in lockdown. You kind of didn't want to put that on other people when you know that they're dealing with so much because of the same pandemic. But then, yeah, maybe like when I realized that it was going to be quite long term, I just really started to be like quite firm and not unwavering, saying, this is what I need, this is how it's going to work, these are the stuff that I can do. Anything that's not important, you're going to have to find someone else to cover it, because like Jaden's education is more important. And I had to kind of explain that to my director. He can't get back these years. Projects, other people can do them, other people can take my place, or we can be more flexible, but I can't be flexible in my son's education.
Yeah, it sounds like you honed a really pragmatic approach and didn't apologise for it, which is good.
Yeah, I tried to not, in the beginning I had the guilt, and then after I was like, no, like, because I didn't, when you go in and you're like, I'm so sorry, then there's always someone's like, I'm asking you to do me a favour, when in actual fact, we're all in the middle of a pandemic. The truth is my son needs to be educated. It's the law. So here's what we're going to do. And that was sort of my approach. You're going to do this, I'll take this. And also I had to be very protective of the fact that I still deserve my evenings and my weekends, and I still deserve time to do other tasks. So I used to feel really guilty about that. Because I like do multiple things. Like I run a consultancy that supports researchers in Africa to become research active. And I used to think, what about my director's like, oh, how come she still has time to that? But it's like, no, that's my time. I still want to be able to have movie night with Jay. And if I can't do it, I just can't do it.
Yeah. John, I mean, all three of you have had to do homeschooling, which, because I've got a 2-year-old, I've felt quite lucky that I haven't had to do. But how have you found, we've touched a bit on homeschooling, but how did you find navigating that? And also, if anyone in the chat wants to give any tips about homeschooling, because I know I know the schools and nurseries are officially kind of open again, but I know that are in this sort of stop-start cycle of schooling for 2 weeks, or kids having to go into isolation, getting the text just the night before, and then having to sort of scrabble to sort stuff out. So it's obviously an ongoing issue.
So my oldest Christopher used Google Classroom, which is a pretty good tool, actually. My appreciation of, I think everyone, appreciation of teaching went up tenfold. And I think it was Janae who said it earlier. I think it was really difficult to get my children to respect me as a kind of a teacher. I struggle enough as a parent, but certainly when I went into kind of teaching mode, they really didn't want to know. Where I think if they were in a school environment, there's a kind of a structure there. But it was mental. Like I'd be doing Zoom calls on my phone, and my wife would, again, I'm lucky in a 2-parent family, we'd be swapping over. She was in a really high pressure job and environment as well. And we were both coming down to work with Christopher and try and get him to do his work. And then there was our youngest, Joseph, was, as I said, on another platform. Some of the teachers weren't quite au fait with the digital tools, so they were like brilliant at teaching English or maths, but they didn't know how to do it, and there was there was kind of frustrations there. And then we kind of had to do work, and then we had to do our work as well. And you asked that question earlier about kind of enlightened managers. I did a piece of work for a design lab called Fathom, which was helping newsrooms at the time move to kind of distributed working from home. So I spoke to lots of managers in newsrooms about what they had been doing. And yeah, there was, journalists love a moan, and we do love to moan about our bosses, but there were a lot of enlightened people out there who would speak to start. I think there was that rush at the start where we just like, everyone's got to be constantly on. There was that sense of presenteeism, and there was kind of there was one good example was, lots of journalists use Slack, and you can signal on Slack when you're on your break. And one newsroom boss told their staff to not only take a break, but you have that little bell sign, or you're away on Slack when you're there, just to signal to everybody else on the group that you were taking a break, or you'd finished, or you got off the grid. There was one, this was done pre-pandemic, but there was one journalist at the BBC who managed a small team, and I think you may have kept it on into the virtual world that we all live in, but he would have a music mood board just to signal how people were feeling. So you could kind of choose a song. You could be Shiny Happy People by REM if you were feeling good, or Callum Scott Dancing on My Own if you're feeling a bit down. But it was kind of a nice kind of way to signal to people what mood or what place you're in. So I think that the best managers were the empathetic ones, and maybe had a better grasp of kind of digital tools and how to lead.
Yeah, I think empathy, it really does come down to empathy, doesn't it? And just acknowledging that it's hard as well, and acknowledging that it's not working from home, it's like working in a pandemic, which is very different. A plus side for me definitely was much greater sort of collaboration with my team, and I was really grateful everyone really pitched in and rallied around, and I had a really positive experience, so I was definitely lucky. And someone in the chat, actually, Malia, has said, I think workplaces need to provide managerial support too, actually training people on how to manage people effectively and compassionately. Because I think often journalists, you move into journalism because you like journalism, not because you want to manage people, and then you end up managing people. Maybe you don't have the training, and there's a lot that's just assumed, isn't there? So maybe
Absolutely.
like like a crib sheet or a kind of thing on things to be mindful of would be really helpful.
But journalists aren't trained in leadership. I saw that question as well, is that they, as I think I said it earlier on, they move up the so-called greasy pole because they're tough and because they can soak up pressure. So it doesn't make them the best. You know, I'm a, you know, it may be a sweeping generalization, but generally we all know people, you know, bosses who are just hard as nails, who are tough, who, and that's in our DNA. That's how we define ourselves as journalists. There's one, I don't know if there's an apocryphal story, but there was one really tough news editor who since became an editor of a national newspaper. He worked all the hours that God sent, and it was kind of rumored that, and I've heard the story so many times, that his wife would bring his kids in their pajamas into work and he would run down to kiss them goodbye. And I've heard that story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it was kind of interesting, not so much whether it was true or not, it was more the fact that it inspired awe as kind of much as pity, where it's like, wow, he works so hard, he works so long, that his wife has to bring the kids in their pajamas and he kisses them goodbye. And I think that sense of the cultural thing that I was talking about earlier, we need to adapt our cultures to parenting. And this is the opportunity, I think, you know, we're in the middle of the pandemic. This is the moment now to hit the reset button and reassess how we do things, you know, and one of those things is just knowing about people's situations at home. And that's kind of tricky because, you know, work, you know, they literally can, you know, they can see into our living rooms, you know, say in our lives, and that can be complex because some people, you know, want to keep work at arm's length. But I think one of the things that we can take away from it is that it's just an understanding of people's situation. We're talking through the prism of parenting today, just understanding how bloody tough it is for parents at the moment. If that's one good thing that can come of this year, then I'll take it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, as you've said, people are sort of seeing right into our homes and living rooms, and I think it's relevant to talk about sort of setting boundaries in virtual settings because I mean, I know a lot of us have been sort of put onto big WhatsApp groups or constant emails going on, or Slack channels always buzzing. So, I mean, at times I've always felt like I'm sort of on and having that boundary. I used to quite enjoy the commute home because it sort of punctuated between my work life and my home life, and now I don't have that. So yeah, I mean, Azana, how have you kind of set those boundaries in virtual settings? Is there anything you've done to sort of keep that distance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been difficult. I mean, I kind of say I have pretty much at this point, I guess going into the second lockdown, sort of come up with a rhythm for myself and how I know I can sort of keep myself on track or sort of keep my brain intact, mental health intact. And I think kind of I had to, even though this is quite, I guess, controversial to say in news, but I did have to reduce my news intake. Really, because I found myself like, you know, normally, as you said, in the normal working world, I'll get up, maybe listen to a bit of radio on the way in. And then as soon as I get in the door, that's when the TVs are on and that's when the news and everything starts. But I was finding that like I would get out of bed and then I'll check social media and then I listen to radio and then my TV in my bedroom's on and then I go downstairs, the TV's on and getting my kid ready. And it kind of just felt like it just became too much. It was just too much in my, as I said, the lines between work me and mum me were getting too blurred. And so now what I do is I make an effort to meditate every morning. I'm one of those mindful people. Like I generally find for me, a moment to myself, like 5 minutes of stillness, quiet, center myself really helps. And especially when I was homeschooling my son, because he's 5. And so even though they sort of say, we're doing all these digital stuff for them and all these digital workshops. He's 5, so he always needs me to help him or give him, you know, tips of how to do things and make sure things are working properly. So he always needed my help, always. And I just found that I just never had time to myself, or if I did, I'd be upset with myself because I wasn't working. And like, so definitely now meditating in the morning, definitely making sure now when I drop my son off to school and when I'm coming back home, that's when I'll key into the news and find out what's going on. And yeah, just making sure, you know, we have dinner at the table and my phone's not on my hand, the news isn't on, like I'm really like connecting with him. I feel like those are just very small things, but those are little things that I think have really helped me and have really helped set boundaries. And I just quickly wanted to touch on one of the points that John said about you know, the working environment, especially within journalism. And I do think for me, one of the things that I really benefited from was, I think at the BBC we're quite lucky, there are quite a lot of women in very key positions, and a lot of the women that I work closely with or my managers are women. And I think they were very understanding and very supportive, and didn't pressure me, and kind of really understood what was going on. And I'm not saying that's all women, I'm not saying men aren't capable of doing this, but I just found for me that those relationships, and I think women in those positions, I think really sort of helped me.
Yeah, I feel the same, and I benefit from a lot of the sort of networks that you could go to Zoom kind of sessions a bit like this, really, where you could share your experiences and just sort of feel like others were going through something similar. And I found, in terms of like setting boundaries, I tried something I sort of did towards the end of the first lockdown, was I'd like block out an hour of lunch and really just try and safeguard that. And then with my son there, I'd make sure we sort of had some quality time, because there was always that thing where you're sort of halfway working, halfway parenting, and it was difficult, but just to totally be present. And I take the apps off my phone during the weekend or when I'm not working, because it's just that compulsive habit to kind of keep checking, and yeah, limiting the amount of news as well, because it was just completely overwhelming. Janae, how have you managed to sort of setting boundaries in terms of the work, you know, everything kind of going online now, and have you managed to do that?
About like the managers and having empathy, and I feel like because I work in like science and health, it's slightly different. Whereas a lot of the people, like when we're talking about health correspondents and editors or scientific scientists who are editors, everything's very black and white. So what I've kind of done is I haven't tried to get empathy from them. I haven't tried. A lot of the people that I work with are middle-aged white men who are married. They will never understand what my day-to-day looks like. And rather than getting frustrated with them, trying to tell them that, I just worked out what worked for me, and I put it in a very pragmatic way. And I literally just left it down to, I remember having a conversation with my director, and by the time I finished talking, it was just whether it was going to be a yes or a no, because I'd literally panned out who could cover this, how this would work, what hours. I thought about everything for you, and I've made and I created a system that worked for me, and you just had to say yes. And since then, that's how it's kind of worked, rather than me trying to get you to understand why it needs to work like this and why I can't do that, because that's when he'll make suggestions that weren't really helpful. Like one of the things where I said to him, okay, Jaden needs a lot of support, he's got a lot of Zooms, will be like fighting over the laptop. I woke up one day and he sent an extra laptop to my house, and I already had an extra laptop, but he thought that would help because then Jaden would have his own laptop. In actual fact, because of Jaden's age and how he has a problem with his attention, I have to sit on those Zooms with him, or you can walk in and he'll be rolling on the floor, or yeah, he could be doing a range of things. So we don't even go down to what Jaden can do when he's meant to be on his Zoom. So by me just kind of setting out exactly what I wanted, I found that a lot easier. And in terms of boundaries, I think it was easier. I fear for what it would be like if we have a lockdown in the winter. And because it was summer, we were able to go outside a lot, we were able to go to walks, we did a lot of exercise. I was probably one of the, I didn't actually put on any weight in lockdown. That's because I literally had that time where I was like, I need to work out every day because I had to like burn some steam somehow. And I really utilized long walks to tire them out. But I do really fear for what will happen in January and February, because Jaden's school closed for the last 2 weeks. and we've just found it really hard. And even now he's not ready to go to bed, he's bouncing off the walls. But yeah, it's really hard to spend. We went to the park today, we wasn't there for very long because it's so cold. So he was like, "Mummy, I want to go home." So I wonder how we're going to cope with that, and how that will be when we're actually going to be locked in the house with the doors closed and the windows closed as well.
Yeah, that's going to be an evolving process, isn't it, to work out how to cope. I remember when we spoke before in advance of this chat, and you had a really nice idea of like a reward jar and like date nights, like you said. It'd be nice to hear about.
Yeah, the reward jars come back. Yeah, so I kind of wrote down little rewards that Jaden could have. If it was time on his iPad, or if it was like to play Wii, or it would be something for me. It would be like, oh, mommy gets a face mask, or like we would have date night and stuff like that. So we kind of did that. And another thing that was really good is a visual timetable. So I had my timetable and Jaden's timetable, and I wrote them out so that he could visualize it, so he could see, okay, mommy's going to be on a meeting only for an hour, so I can't come in here, which he normally does anyway, for about an hour, and he could understand that. And I think that really helped as well. And also, so he knew where his day end, because the school day is very structured, so they know we're going to have break, we're going to have this, we're going to go outside. They hear bells ringing, so also for him to know that sometimes he'll be like, why are we still doing work? And I'll go look at your timetable, and he'll see how we're going to break up the day as well. So I think that really helped us.
So it sounds like some forward planning like that and creativity will hopefully see you through the winter as well.
Yeah, visual timetables, I really recommend them, because I feel like it makes the kid understand what's happening in their day as well, and it gives them back a bit of control, because it's so unusual being at home. You can just feel like, am I going to be sitting here forever doing work with this woman? Especially because even when we used to do work, Jaden would be like to me, Miss Dokia doesn't teach it this way, and I'll be like, well, this is the only way I know. So I think he really needed to know that it wasn't going to be for that long. Or we use timers as well. I got like sound timing, so he would see, okay, this task is only going to be 15 to 20 minutes.
That's smart. I don't want to put this person on the spot, but I've just noticed that Alexis, the Reuters Nigeria bureau chief, has joined the call, and he was someone that featured in John's report, someone who I think manages about 20 people but also has children. So kind of talking about managers, it might be nice to hear, Alexis, if you're allowed to be unmuted. I think Liz, can I unmute people, or Liz, would you be able to unmute Alexis and the video, if you don't mind? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, it would be great to have your video as well, if possible, but I don't know how it works. Either way, oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. Hi.
It's good to hear from you, because as a manager and a parent, we're kind of lacking that at the moment. So it'd be great to hear how you've found. I mean, how has it been for you as a manager and as a parent? That says it all.
I've literally just helped get the kids to bed, and then I fell asleep. And then I woke up and saw a message from John, the guy who wrote the report, just flagging this up. So that's why I've joined. But I'd love to talk about it as my experience as a manager. So it's pretty dark in here because I'm in
no, it's not.
I'm trying to stay quiet.
It looks, the lighting's great.
Okay, great. So what's the question is, how has it been in terms of a manager?
Because we've been talking from our own point of view, but we're not people that manage other people, so.
It's been really intense. Been really, really, really intense. Ultimately, what you've got to do is, as a manager, you've got to make sure that you always think about other people. You've got to make sure that you remain empathetic. So the thing is, obviously, as a dad and as a husband, I want to put my family first, but I've still got to do my job. So, people have gone through lots of really intense things out here in Nigeria. We've got sky high inflation. So the cost of living has gone up massively. And this is relevant because then I've got to be constantly aware of what my team is going through in terms of the issues they've got in terms of putting food on the table for their families. I've got to make sure that when tempers are fraying or if they're tired, that I remember what's going on in their family life. So without going into too much detail, a member of my team has a child who's fallen ill, and obviously it's a terrible time anyway to have a child that's unwell, but then during the pandemic it's been extra complicated. It's not even related to the pandemic, but there's that illness to bear in mind. And then I've got to make sure that I keep in mind my manager, keeping the team afloat, make sure the logistics run on time, and then of course the editorial side of things. What stories have we got? I remember when John wrote the report, we were talking about it, and I was saying that I think around the world there are kind of three main strains that you've constantly got to bear in mind as an editor. You're thinking about the stories your team are putting out. The three main strains being well, the public health side of things and what's happening in your country when you're writing a story, the political ramifications of what's happening, because there have been political ramifications everywhere in terms of how countries have handled the story and handled the pandemic, and then the economic ramifications. So, and then the economic side of things and the business implications are a big deal for Reuters, obviously, because of the way in which, you know, our target audience. So, I mean, typically my day involves being woken up at about 5 in the morning. So we've got 3 kids. So we've got a 6-year-old, then one who's going to turn 4 in January, and then we've got a 10-month-old. And I mean, the 10-month-old was born in late January, and obviously we didn't expect there to be a pandemic. So it's a really big leap having a 3rd child, but then having a baby during the pandemic has just been really intense. So the baby wakes up at about 5, or one of the other children comes racing in, and then from there I've got to kind of either hold the baby to get back to sleep or kind of entertain one of the other children. And then I've got to bear in mind my boss, who's an hour ahead of me because she's in South Africa. And so I've got to think of the stories from what we're going to have with the stories, what's happening with planning lists. I've got to help get the kids dressed, and the manic bit where you kind of bathe them and have breakfast and then get them out the door. I'm on the school run with a laptop, trying to log in and get ready for meetings and maybe be on a Zoom call. Actually, it's Teams.
Well, you might be well placed then.
Only on the way back from the school run, and then from there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just I can see on the sidebar there's a lot of chat about how to deal with burnout. So I was wondering if you might have some good tips on how you deal with avoiding burnout, because it sounds like you're crazy busy. If you can hear.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. I mean, well, I can hear. I don't know what the sound is like. The internet's terrible where I am. Well, I think it's good to have a hobby if you've got something that can take your mind off things. So I try to. I mean, I try to run, so that helps for at least once, and that's for 20 minutes each time. I find that really useful. I think those are things, and trying to make sure that you have a cut-off point whereby you say to yourself, right, enough is enough for the day, because you could work all day, every day. So I try to make sure that maybe like 9 o'clock, unless there's breaking news, like, come on, I really got to stop, or at least after I've put the kids to bed, I'm like really this. And one other thing, I try to carve out some time to just play with the kids. Even if it's like 10, 15 minutes, because otherwise I don't know what I'm doing this for.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm sure everyone on here will feel the same. So thanks for jumping on. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's all right. No, you're welcome. Okay.
There's a lot of chat going on the side, and we've only got 10 minutes left. But one thing I wanted to thought might be useful is for the panelists, digital tools. So obviously they've been particularly useful, and it feels like we've maybe accelerated the kind of progress that we may have been making with sort of new processes and workflows. Is there any tools that you found particularly useful? So for example, for me, Otter, the transcription program, was a bit of a revelation. I don't know why I didn't know about it before, but I found I could put people on loudspeaker and then see Otter translate it before my eyes, which I wouldn't really be able to do in a busy office. So that's been really helpful to me. But I don't know if anyone else has got any useful digital tools, and anyone that wants to put it in the chat as well. But as
Yeah, I tweeted out something on the HH London hashtag that Tom Trunard, who's the co-founder at Fathom, he's done a really comprehensive list on all the tools that you can use. So Google Classroom was one that I've learned myself from being a parent, but Miro is a kind of a collaborative kind of whiteboard platform, which is I've seen a lot of people using, where you can kind of brainstorm. It's kind of, they look like post-it notes, which are really good. There's CrowdTangle as well, which is a Facebook-owned audience kind of tool where you can figure out what your audience is talking about. Yeah, I've put the link out, but I might just drop it in the chat here. That's excellent. And also just a quick thank you to Alexis for jumping on, for being put on the spot and answering all those questions really well. I think we'd all like to have you as a manager, judging by the way that you spoke and handled that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I might put someone else on the spot now, just as we're on a roll of putting people on the spot, because I know we were talking about bigger kids, bigger problems, and most of us have got sort of younger kids, but teenagers I wanted to touch on a bit as well. Not something that I've had any experience in yet, but I might bring on my friend and colleague Vivica, if she is here. Yeah, if that's okay. Vivica, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Hello. No, don't say sorry. Can you put your video on? Or
Yeah. So,
yeah,
hi. Sorry, I'm not very well dressed.
You've been at Pilates.
Yeah, I'm very lucky in many ways because I have two teenagers who don't need that much. I don't need to help them with their homework anymore, and I can go to the shop without dragging them along. But the biggest problem has been mental health, not just for them, but also all their friends. And just having prospects, having things to look forward to, being able to see your friends, being able to relax. Both their exams were cancelled, GCSEs and A-levels. So it's like their whole futures kind of have turned to nothing, and they literally would spend days and days in bed. The schools were doing nothing. It took them until after Easter to start giving some homework, but there were no direct classrooms, there was no Zooms, there was just homework set, and that was it. So it's been really tough, and in the end, I think I wasn't that insistent with the homeschooling. I thought their mental health was more important, and I wasn't that insistent with following the rules because I thought, well, they're relatively safe. But other friends of theirs fell out with their parents and even moved out because it was like, well, either you stay with us at home or you see your friends, but then you can't come back. So it's been really tough for young teenagers, I find.
I mean, how did you stay resilient to sort of stay strong for them, if that makes sense? What sort of things did you do to be able to cope yourself?
I didn't always stay strong. We've all lost it at some point.
Yeah.
I think you just have to be very patient and kind and very few expectations, and you just can't plan anything. You can't plan ahead. You just have to take each day as it comes, I feel, in terms of their prospects. So it's made me a slack parent, but that's the way to survive, I guess.
No, I know what you mean. And you have to sort of let some things go, don't you, and not sweat the small stuff.
Definitely not sweat the small stuff.
Thank you.
Kirstie, sorry, I just wanted to, one of the points I saw in the chat, and one of the things that I wanted to actually speak about was, we're talking a lot about ourselves and like work lives and stuff, but also I think one of the things that's been the most interesting is explaining lockdown. So my son's 5, and so like not going swimming, not seeing his friends, not going jumping, or all of the very active things we're used to doing on museums in the weekend and whatnot. I think that was also kind of I guess a learning process, trying to explain, how do you explain a virus to 5-year-old? Like there's a few times you sort of said to me, well, like, why can't I see it? And if I ever saw the virus, I'd kick it. And it's like, well, okay, all of us would, but like, that's not, how we do things, and trying to explain I think as well, when he was going back into school, you know, the new rules about like not being so close to people, and if you sneeze, use a tissue. I mean, we were kind of going through the hygiene training and stuff anyway, but all of those extra rules, I think trying to explain to kids was an extra layer that parents had to deal with, as well as, I guess, trying to come to terms with it all ourselves. And so I kind of, just found that to be really interesting, but also trying to, I guess, remain optimistic when explaining it to him, right? Because he's 5. I don't want to be doom and gloom. So I think trying to, in a way, use the kids to kind of help keep yourself optimistic while explaining something that is quite complicated and quite dark.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And how, so you found mindfulness and meditation at the beginning of the day really helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a Pilates person, so when the gyms are closed, I was like, oh my God, because it's like the one thing keeping me sane. But yeah, I kind of had to adapt the same mindfulness that I used to apply into my day-to-day life, and just quiet. And I've managed to, at times, actually get my son to do yoga, like, or in his mind, it's just being quiet for like a few minutes. Like, I just think that sometimes is good, and especially, as I said, in the world that we live in, when there's news all the time and something's always happening. And I mean, for me, I definitely found the first lockdown, in terms of the stuff happening to Black Lives Matter, very, very stressful. Just not even a journalistic way, just as a human level, as a woman, as a person. And I found during those times, I would literally just like have a few moments of the day of just being mindful, because I just needed to create a bit more distance between myself and what was going on in the world.
Yeah. I mean, we nearly come to the end, really. It went really quickly. I don't know if any, Janae, if you had any final things that you wanted to say, and then to John afterwards.
I think that point about explaining, I think it was an extra layer when Black Lives Matter happened, and then he was also explaining the pandemic. And these are both things that we don't have control of, and we don't have a date where I can say it's going to end. And that was really hard. And that's when I just really focused on just loving on him. That's when we would have a lot of date nights, a lot of going for walks. And I've kind of put education on the back burner and put our mental health forward. I'm lucky that my mum's a teacher. So I always had that voice of reason being like, if you don't do homeschooling for 2 to 3 days, your child is going to be fine. Like, there's periods in the school term where we do take a break from teaching, and, you know, like around Christmas period. So you don't have to, I would see all the lessons like piling up in Google Classroom, get really anxious. And she was like, no, just go and deal with that. Because he kind of came to me one day and said, why is everybody saying I can't breathe? And I just didn't know how to deal with it. And then once we kind of had the conversation, we just spent a lot of time just like, when we're Christians, we spent a lot of time spending time with God, and a lot of time going for walks, exercising, and just literally being like, education, we'll come back to that. And that's another thing that we did. A lot of the stuff I kind of spread out over the summer as well. So we kind of I did little bits of the summer to kind of make up for where we lacked in term time. But I think that's another thing, don't expect to get everything done and for it to be perfect. Like I said, I've homeschooled him for 2 weeks now because of cases in his school, and I've been just very relaxed about it. I just wanted to get you to touch, I saw the question about how do you explain your work and your responsibilities to my child. I would just say one thing I don't believe in doing, I don't believe in telling Jaden that I have to work to earn money, because keeping the lights on, electricity and etc., I don't think he needs to worry about those things as a 7-year-old, that's my responsibility. And so I sort of show him the output of my work. So if there's like a piece that's gone live, I'll show him the article, or like if it's a report for TV, I'll show him the report and be like, oh, this is what mommy's done, so he can kind of understand the outputs. And like whenever Kirstie is on the TV, I'll be like, oh, that's like one of mommy's bosses. So he kind of understands what my job is. So he'll go around being like, oh, my mom works for Kirstie. And I'm like, no, I really don't. But like, he kind of understands the responsibility, or any way that I can explain to him that, you know, what viruses are and how it kind of, what I kind of do for work. But I don't really, so since then, he's come to me a little bit more and been like, oh, mum, don't you think you should do your work now? Because people are going to need X, Y, and Z. Like, he'll come and check me and be like, oh, it looks like you watch Netflix, mummy. You need to do this, and that, because your job requires this. So I feel like, be careful with that one. But I would more talk to them about, like, these are the fruits of my labour, and let them see it from that side.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good way of thinking about it. Actually, I'm going to bear that in mind when Elliot's old enough to ask me what I do as a job.
It means I can't take a day. I can't Skype. If I decide, especially when he's been hearing me here, if I decide to watch Netflix tomorrow, he's going to be like, if I'm doing my things, you better do yours. I'm just like,
Accountability.
okay, sir.
And John, finally, any last comments? And there's so much we could carry on. We could carry on.
So just some of the things from the report was that people spoke about being in a pandemic bubble, just unremittingly depressing kind of news that was here, and people expect journalists to be objective, which we can be, but we're not robots. We kind of have feelings, and there was intensely personal stories that happened this year that people had impact on. So I think newsroom managers should think about the kind of work that they shovel towards that their staff, and have some kind of awareness around that. So again, we have kids at different ages. There's lots of things about how do you speak to your kids about the pandemic. So as I said, my children are 7 to 10, and there's a product called the Week Junior, which is amazing, which kind of, you couldn't ignore it. I kept some of the issues just away from my eldest Christopher just at the start, because I was so stressed out and I didn't want him to have to deal with it, but actually they dealt with it really well, really sensitively, really positively. So I think that's a good way for children to get into things. In terms of demarking the day, we used to play in the first lockdown a game of Uno. That was when, me and Laura came down, our work was finished, and we'd play card games, and they whipped me. I came last all the time for some reason. And the other thing is demarking the day as well. Again, this might be hard if you don't have a toddler, but one person told me that they walk to work in the morning and then go home from work in the evening, which is it's a circuitous route. They're just going round in a circle, but that allows them to carve out, this is my work is starting. Of course, if you have a toddler and it's raining, you might not have those issues. But in terms of what people are saying, you need kind of demarcation points. And Alexis is saying, hobbies and, stuff, things that can kind of transport you away and carve out that time that you have for people. And the other thing is, as you said, parenting, you have this notion of the nuclear family, which is all the same. Parenting is all different, whether there's two parents, whether there's one parent, we're all different. And we just, again, Alexis touched on that. It's about empathy and kind of understanding whatever your situation, whether you're a parent or not.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really nice way of finishing. As I said, there's so much we could carry on with, but hopefully we can share these resources, and I'd really like to carry on the conversation, really. But thank you, everyone. And I think we should all be really proud that we're still here and we're doing it, and however we are, we're doing it and we're doing well. So pat on the back, round of applause for us all, I think.